Welcome. Welcome to the same old garden that we've been here for years now. Years. But today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, I think, that I really try to document in my head, but I never actually produced any useful content around the topic, which is things I wish I knew on my day one in DAOs. Does it still feel like day one for you then?
Sort of, right? I mean, it's such a long journey, um, that yeah, it still feels like we're very early still in figuring out all this stuff. So, in a way, yeah, for sure.
Yes, and also in a non-philosophical sense, it looks like a much higher absolute number of people will have their first day in DAOs in the coming times than ever before. We're still at the very much the picking up of that curve, and I think the reason why this topic shown as relevant for me is because the things we document and put down in these like evergreen content forms that we're creating are actually probably going to help shape stigmergically what comes out of DAOs, right? And we already see sort of a, I don't know how to say in biology when there's this original trait and that trait starts to divide and specialize and sophisticate towards different branches, creating different species and stuff. So like DAOs are like amoebas at the moment, but we're going to start to create vertebrates, invertebrates, fungi, and plants, and all these other kind of specialized um,
Right, right.
structures. And I think it's useful now if we start to identify some of the things that we think are important that we have learned. And I have one that's the most stupid one that I wanted to kick everything off. You know how
Right.
when you're using a shared platform to build file to make files together, let's say like Google Docs or Notion or things like this, and there's always the option of sharing with the organization, people who have the organization email, but we're all in 17 different organizations at a single time, and you have to keep finding the correct email for login. So the first thing I teach to everyone, and I'm surprised of how long it takes for people to actually adopt, is always send the version that is edited with the link for everyone, so nobody has to ever have an extra handshake. I think if we accounted for the amount of coordination hours that get lost in these only the organization links, it would be a lot.
What do you mean by the Yeah, what do you mean by those organizational links?
Instead of sharing with someone's email, I always ask people to send the edit, like anyone with this link can edit version of it. And I
Oh,
think if
yeah,
everybody adopted it, life was just going to be so much easier. If it's not
totally.
financial documentation, like if it's a brainstorm for a tweet thread, you don't need all the organizational layers of protection, right? If I want to show it to my cousin or something.
Right. Well, I mean, is that just part of that super common problem in the amoeba DAOs, as you say it, where DAOs are today anyway, with like
And we,
the conflict of decentralized communities with like super distributed power and things, but having to rely on centralized coordination tools that require like emails and things. Um,
yeah,
is that also part of that problem?
that is the central part of that problem because we haven't truly figured out Web3 identity yet, right?
Mhm. Right. Um,
Ceramic's coming, hopefully.
yeah, it's crazy how identity has been talked about for so many years, and we still don't really have like a too many usable things.
Hey, Travis, welcome on stage.
Hi. Hi, guys.
Hey,
Nice to see you. Hi, everyone. I don't want to switch the subject prematurely, but I have two tips that I wish I knew before getting into DAOs. One is that there's some really incredible time tracking software out there, and I've been experimenting with it since the beginning of the year. I'm a participant in a half dozen DAOs and Discords Discord and Telegram and Signal and just like all the communications. It's really schizophrenic, jumping all over the place all the time.
hmm.
And then the month has passed and you're like, okay, so what did I do? Where did I spend my attention and how did I generate value for all these organizations. So having some clear tool for accounting for that, for quantifying that, seems really essential. I wish I had it a year ago.
Just for like, yeah, like yourself as an individual, not necessarily like a organization tracking everybody's time or anything, right?
Absolutely.
Just more for like your own uh, awareness of like, I like how you phrase that. Like, what have I been doing, and where did I actually add value? Uh, that's
It's also
interesting.
really interesting to see how many hours you can total up at the end of a week. I mean, I worked like 65 hours last week, and that's just insane. I think it's insane. You guys are probably used to it.
No,
The other
not so
tip I
much.
would give is,
I did that many years ago myself.
yeah, the other tip I would give is anticipate taxes early. I am not an Opolis member. I'm tracking all that myself, and I found out about like a coin tracker, and I know that there's other variations, but
Mhm.
being able to think about which, like how you're exposing yourself to taxable events, and have that inform how you're managing your tokens across different wallets. And it's not just about what is and is not visible and what you will or will not be taxed for, but um, being able to track the transactions. um, it just seems like completely indispensable at this point. And I wish I had thought about that and anticipated that before I got really deep into DAOs and Web3.
Yeah, yeah. I think in general, there's a lot of things like that, right? Just contributing in Web3 in general, or moving from like traditional corporations or anything, and moving into like a more volatile assets. And it's kind of like where it speaks to the same kind of thing you're talking about there with like tracking your time. It's really wild information that you can get. Like, yeah, you're getting paid in a bunch of like volatile tokens potentially, and then like actually being able to see like the combination of your time tracking of like where did I spend my time, and where did I spend my time wisely, and being able to like help yourself navigate where to better spend your time, I think is the point of that. um, and then but combined with that with the same information on the financial side, like getting paid like volatile tokens and things, and being able to actually like see what value did you get back from the value that you added, I think is also part of that equation. That just helps make the entire um, your entire experience as a contributor more coherent. I think is like some of the biggest things that are kind of lacking in the space, and they are things I would love to have at day one at DAOs, but we don't really have like great uh, suggestions anywhere for people to do that. But that's like a whole package, I think, or a whole area where vast improvement is needed, I suppose.
What's up? Hey guys, sorry I'm late.
Yo
Can
yo.
anyone catch me up? Where are we at?
We're
We're
talking about the two most exciting things in the world, man: time tracking and taxes.
well, yeah, like I guess the first prompt here is like kind of like what would we like to, what would we have liked to have known like on day one as a DAO contributor, I think, to kind of help us be better DAO contributors early on, I think is kind of the question.
Right.
So, yeah, and Travis was sharing that like um, time tracking stuff has really been useful to him for like, because he's, you're working across like many different DAOs in this kind of world. It's not just like it's a lot easier just to track your time when you're just like working on one thing. But when you're contributing to many different communities, that gets wildly incoherent. So yeah, that's a really cool thing to suggest to people to do, I think.
Yeah,
Slash,
I think
I'll probably even ask what you're using so that I can try it myself because it sounds really useful.
it's a good point, and it also, because of kind of the fuzzy nature between DAOs and sub DAOs, it can get a little confusing because you're like, am I double dipping on this one, or am what I doing with this sub DAO actually something that
Yeah.
should be like compensated from by this other DAO? Um, so those relationships, yeah, it's still so fuzzy and kind of hard to deal with. But
Yeah, trying to avoid the conflict of interest was actually what got me started with the time tracking thing because I wanted to avoid double dipping, like Uber House and WarCamp, or between Moloch DAO and this new Meta Moloch joint initiative with Meta Cartel, things of that nature. And yeah, like I have no attachment to this company, but I'll just say Clockify is the tool that I found, and it's free, which is cool. And it also has, I haven't explored this, but Earth to Travis and I have been thinking about just all the time that's spent in Discord, and Clockify actually has an integration that can track time in specific apps, and Discord is one of them. That, you know, I haven't ventured down that rabbit hole, but that's kind of profound to think about. Like, how much time do you guys spend on Discord every day?
Yeah, it's a little terrifying. I'm pretty sure I'd have an aneurysm if I got that data.
Yeah, too much Discord.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm in a very atypical moment of my life.
conversation. Conversation is a very important part of coordination between humans. So it does take up a lot of time, you know, just conversing where especially, yeah, we're all remote, global first kind of systems, right? So yeah, it's an interesting paradigm. We end up spending a lot of time in these things.
Felipe, what were you saying about your situation?
It's just that it's different now that I became almost project monogamous. My contributions across the board have been condensated, I guess, on the Taoist, except for this podcast, and it feels weird because I am basically the gender of the thing. I do everything that's completely unglamorous, bizarre, or dangerous, and I miss the confusion of having 17 things to do. But at the same time, the Taoist is such a bizarre project that it feels like I'm working for several different DAOs within one project. But at the same time, I'm slightly alone or with one or two other people in each mission. It feels really weird, and I think this is something showed up that will show up in most beginning of a DAO journeys that people will be in, where you will be doing something important, and people who are far away from the thing you're doing might be giving a lot of support and a lot of cheers, but at the at the actual thick of it in the beginning, until everything is set up, you're gonna feel a little alone, right? So I wanted to invite you guys, Van and Deacon, to the early days of DAO House. Did this happen in a little bit of something? And I also remember, just not to ramble too much, but I was there for the first days of Meta Factory as well. And comparatively to what it is now, it was also sort of a lonely journey of establishing that meme and putting the mechanisms out.
Yeah, I think that that may have been the biggest learning experience for me in general was, going from kind of just this head in my laptop coding most of the time, doing a little bit of client management here and there, into starting these DAOs, which really meant starting communities. So that there's like may all have kind of the community may have some kind of organic genesis kind of moment where it's like we all have this aligned incentive. But if there isn't someone there that's doing the stuff like where you just talked about, Felipe, of explaining the idea or doing all the little like side things that need to be done, making sure people are getting communicated to or onboarding, all those things which are like community engineering roles or community manager roles. Um, there has to be someone there doing that, and they have to be tied really deeply into the initiative itself. They have to be it. Like you said, you're the gender of it or whatever. So I remember in the early days of Raid Guild and of DAO House of spending a lot of time on Discord and trying to keep everyone who's interested engaged, everyone who's a core contributor engaged, everyone like making sure everyone's heard and making sure that people are getting support and whatever it is. And you can look at like, although I'm not as involved in Raid Guild anymore because it's matured to the point where that role is kind of distributed across everyone. Um, there was was just me like talking nonstop to Simano for like 4 days straight, trying to explain like what it is. And it may have just been one relationship with one person, but it was really important to make sure that I could explain it to someone who's new and just came on. Now Simano, maybe that's his role now because he's extremely involved at the community level and one of the go-to people that really leads and does things. But initially he was like, wait, why isn't this just a one of one, or why isn't this just a Gnosis safe or something? Why are we doing these different things? And it was like, okay, can I explain the vision to new people? In DAOs too, I mean, I might not have the highest score on Discord chat messages anymore, but for a while there, I had a ton. Just mainly because it was like, I think it's really important for for that people to be heard when they're coming brand new into a space, and if that's just saying hello or something. So that I think that's the
FYI,
kind of someone or so. Yeah, and Vin, you like obviously in Dow in both these, it was me, Vin, and Sama. We both, all three of us, were like extremely involved initially to help get these things rolling, and that's kind of the role of the summoner. Or whatever you want to call it. It's something that you might not expect, but it's a lot of work, and it's more of a long-term kind of vision. Like, um, you know, we really wanted to see these things succeed, so that's what we did. Just did it.
Okay, so this connects me with one thing I wish I knew day one of DAOs, and also like as a DAO summoner, which I'm going through now more intensely than ever before. I just finished sort of the first article. Me, Inga, and other people, everyone with their hands on it in one touch or another, just finished our first governance article for Dawn, which is a DAO's DAO. And I had allotted sort of like 2 or 3 days to write it. And it ended up taking, I shit you not, something around 5 weeks. Because everything that we found that we needed had to be built out of trying to explain it, right? As you said. So, as you said, that Simon was like, why is this a multisig? Why is this? Where's the governance form going to be? Where's this and where's that? And everything got built because of the article. So the process of trying to communicate became a guiding star, a navigational device to the building process itself. And even the raise component of having like finding sponsors and finding sponsorships and having the key conversations with the people who care about the mission of this organization were a little bit driven by the process of trying to map it and document it, which created a never-ending cycle of the thing that I just documented created a conversation that changed what needs to be documented. So go back to the drawing board, and it's been a cycle for like 5 weeks, and I finally finished today on like corona vaccine damage, and all the compromises that happened along the way. The sentence that I created for the team is like being better than what you have to be is bad, because there's so many things for you to do, and there's many things for you to do that you don't know that you have to do them yet. So if you get overly excited about any aspect of it, you're gonna be like out of coordination throughput to get her done. it's been intense.
Man, I just want to echo that a little bit. I think that's so important. My interpretation is you just got to document everything. I wish someone, I mean, I feel like people were saying that to me when I first came into the crypto web space, DAO space, but I didn't really understand it. I always thought there was going to be time later to kind of catch up and to compile my notes and to integrate them in a meaningful way that would add value to myself and to others. But there's never going to be time. It's just going to keep changing, and you have to try to keep up with that documentation, and creating best practices for that documentation for yourself, of course, and for others, I think is key.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, another thing that I think we lucked out on when starting, even back to the Metacartel days, was when a DAO is first getting started, it's kind of vulnerable in a way, and it's kind of like it's a moment where trust is involved a lot. Maybe not at the level because of smart contracts and governance and all that, but having people come in early, like Scott and some other early contributors, that we were really lucky to have these people come in and just be like, "Cool, we get it, and run with it," you know. And what we did well in that aspect, I think, was like not get in their way. So, and this can even happen at that Discord level. Like you start a new Discord server and you're getting all these people in, and all of a sudden you're getting all these requests for admins and new channels and all these things. Don't try to take it all. If someone asks for a new channel, give them admin. Let them run with it. If they're passionate enough to get something rolling, and see what happens. And so you need to have that bit of trust, I think, getting started. Um, and
I
then
think
a lot of luck, right?
yeah, I think early DAOs. I mean, and we should like keep track on or keep ourselves on track that what would we want to know as DAO contributors on day one. But yeah, one big piece is like just being able to understand the DAO better, you know. But like there's a early days of and there's you can enter a DAO that's been around for a while, and that's a wildly different experience than entering a new DAO. But in a new DAO, early formation, like the very beginning of some people talking to each other about like, hey, we both, or like we all want to do this thing. How are we going to do that? Really starts with a conversation and a shared value, right? And then from there, all these things need to be done, documentation and like all these different things. And the key in a DAO is to keep bottlenecks open, right? Like, and that's where the early trust becomes like pretty really nice, like with those early contributors, because like you just kind of have to rely on each other to plug the holes and to clear bottlenecks, so the DAO can just keep doing its thing organically, which good documentation greatly helps, because like then it just kind of like gives everybody the information to do the things that need to be done in the DAO. But that's like some of the first things you have to do are just like clear all the fucking bottlenecks so that everybody can like affect the community in the DAO and do all the things that you're talking about. But there is a lot of trust early until you get like a healthy amount of contributors that are kind of like managing different areas that could become a bottleneck and stop the DAO from doing things.
And I think people like have a bad history of documentation in traditional organizations, and a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
people are opposed to it because it's this standard operating procedure that doesn't ever fucking change. But that's not the case, right? And for me, like the metaphor that's resonating with me is like if I'm going through the machete through the jungle with the machete and I'm like chopping down a path, like the people who are coming behind me don't have to make their own path, right? They can follow that path. They can make
Absolutely.
alterations to that path, and it then should be easier for everybody else coming behind us.
Right. Absolutely. Like one of the things I used to do, when I still try to do it, I don't have to do it as much
Love
anymore
that
because
analogy.
in big communities, but like every time that a thing is done first in a DAO, like a new process or anything is done first, like just write down everything that you did to do it, so that for that purpose, right? Like you hacked the forest, write down what it took you to do it to hack the forest, so that you don't have to do it again, or anybody else can do it. Just like and it is just like literally every single thing, everything that every new process and every new anything just needs to be documented, so that other people can like do it behind you,
Right.
without.
I mean, if you
Yeah.
if you if you if you go through those steps, there's going to be somebody else that needs to follow those steps too. If you have a question, there's going to be other people that are going to have that question too. And it
Hmm.
does kind of become something that has to be habitual for us all. One, to document the steps for us as individuals, but then two, to be able to share those in a meaningful way that can benefit others.
I think one thing that I would have liked to have known, I think, or I mean, it's hard for me because I've been a DAO contributor for so long, and so I have like kind of foundational biases and things. But I think let me see if I can phrase it. Yeah, let me try to phrase that better, and I'll come back.
I'll give them some time to think. Um, I think, one of the most important things that I'm figuring out now is like how important it is, at least for me, to find a focus. There's just like so much information and so many opportunities to get involved. It can be really overwhelming, especially if you're trying to prove yourself and taking on different responsibilities and contributing to different areas. And I know some people are just totally wired differently, and they want to kind of spread themselves out over much more ground. But I like, really going deep rather or before wide, and that can kind of be difficult when you're first exploring, because you're, getting the feel of all of these different communities and learning, how all these different organizations work. But figuring out what filters I think are important to you, and what criteria for a community that you want to participate in is something I would like welcome everybody to consider. And for me, that's just become like the vision, the values, and the vibe. Does this organization have a vision? Like, are there values that I'm aligned with? And is it a vibe? Is this something that, I want to spend my time contributing to?
Yeah, and thanks for the time. That actually reminded me of what I was going to say. So, yeah, like one thing I would have liked to have known is like, you join a new community, whatever it is, a company, a community, an organization, whatever you want to call it. You're a new person, so you kind of, by default, you expect them to have processes. It's kind of like an expectation that people have when they join communities and things, right? Like that there are processes, and I'm a new person, so I probably should just play along with the process for a while, regardless if I have like opinions on it being like wrong or not. But what I would say is that DAOs are very, very open to change. And because of like how quickly they're changing and updating and all these different things, they're very I think that would have been a thing that I would like to know as a DAO contributor is like, don't be afraid to like come in and like suggest radical changes, because DAOs are very open to those types of things. If it's actually a better path, then the community will probably just be like, oh yeah, that's better. Let's do that. Instead of thinking that you have to like fall in line with a current process. Um,
And that fresh perspective is like the most
very
valuable
yeah,
time to
yeah.
actually make a change and question why it's done that way and provide an alternative. Because after we do it a couple of times, just because that's the way it's always been done, it becomes the way it's always been done. And you're not thinking about that anymore.
Mhm. Which is fine, but in cases, but I think that's a really important thing. If you come into a community and you think something's off, don't just be like, oh, it's off, I'm out of here. Like, suggest something better, and see what happens. And if the community is like, no, we're doing this, then whatever, go do something else. If it's that important to you. Um, but yeah, I think I would like to see that more from DAO contributors. We see it a lot from like, I think some of my favorite DAO contributors are those people who come in and like, oh, they kind of poke around for a little while and they're like, oh, I see what's going on. Why aren't we doing it like this? And then we're all like, oh, that's a great idea. Do you want to like run with that? you know? And those are like I think some of the most valuable contributors in DAOs are the ones who really do. I mean, it's different kinds of people. Some people just like to, do things and they're not really thinking about all that, and it's fine. But it is really valuable when people come in and offer like suggestions. That's what a DAO is all about. Just constant iteration of becoming better and better and better together. So, and that's how DAOs evolve.
I think it's one of the hardest things on both sides is like someone has an idea. First of all, maybe it's a cool idea. Uh, Now, if you get out of their way and you let them do it, will they actually do it, right? So sometimes people are just more um,
Right.
like what giving. First of all, you have to say, "Cool." The community has to be like, "Well, run with it, do it." And on the other side, it needs to be on the initiative of the other person or group to be like, "Okay, we will then," you know. Well,
Right.
um,
Like a big, yeah. I think that's, yeah. That's like, yeah, like you'll come in and be like, why isn't anybody doing this? Somebody should do that. You know, like you'll see those kind of comments, and it's like, well, are you that someone? Because like that's how it
Fucking
actually gets
go.
done. You know, like that's you can't
Yeah,
really come in.
that's a very real one.
Yeah, you can't suggest other-
People love giving
Right.
suggestions, don't they?
Right.
But so I created a sentence for this, and it was a tweet that I expected a little bit more reaction. It's like this: it's not that I don't respect your opinion; it's that I only speak prototype. Like, sit down, do something. Like, sketch a document, put it into some form, figure out what's the first action that can be taken, and then either take it or find someone to take it. But preferably take it. Because the results of like actually doing over debating or opinionating, they pile up so fast in general, especially in this space where everything is left to be figured out. There's so many open areas for action. As long as you're not destructive, it's most likely going to be welcomed.
Right.
But once you do though, it doesn't happen so much in the Moloch ecosystem because the on-chain governance and the debate component is minimized by the way it works, and that people mostly work with, or at least in my experience, people mostly work with close-knit groups and federated. But in bigger orgs, I remember the times of onboarding people to Genesis and then to DAOs as a whole, the DAO Stack days. I had these people from the co-op movements, the cooperative movements that I brought in, and they always came to me and said, but this is so political. I have to argue my point and I have to make it make sense. It's like, this is so political. It's like, it's literally a voting technology. DAOs are, at least to a high percentage, politics, right? And I don't think that's a bad thing, to be honest. I think the average person becoming used or enabling themselves to participate as a political agent, deciding on the future of the system is kind of the whole point. And it comes with the constraints of speaking other people's languages, figuring out where they're coming from, trying to understand their points, trying to allay their fears, understand what biases are behind their resistance and things like this. So coming with a lot of emotional patience to dialogue through things is also something I wish everyone knew DAO day one. Since nobody jumped, I can keep rambling.
Yeah, well, out of curiosity, I feel like Weish might have be able to complete this. But is there a substantial or a significant difference in governance and politics that should be called out there?
Well, our resident philosopher and librarian is there.
Like, what is the difference between governance and?
I can do the stupid version and then have Travis come and do the smart version.
Okay.
So once you ask the question, the first thing that sprung up to me is that governance is the structure, is the design, and then politics is the actual navigational path over the territory through which agents deal with the constraints of that structure and then coordinate to redesign that structure in a way that feels legitimate to the systems that can decide that legitimacy. And there's a lot in that delta, right? That's what sprung up in my head. Travis, help me, save me.
Interesting. I like that answer. I really like the question. My initial reaction would be to think that governance is to politics kind of like what complexity is to complication. So complexity is about granular detail. It's about the minutia of the decisions and the architecture that we erect to track those decisions and make sense of them. Governance is akin to an epistemology. It's how we accumulate knowledge and how we track the changes in the evolution of the knowledge. But then politics is like the human element. It's where things get complicated. And it's not just bottlenecks, but it's, I guess it's Moloch a little bit, but it's like human beings as the manifestation of Moloch, right? Like humans are the problem with ideal forms of governance. Humans complicate it with politics. Politics is the propaganda machine. Politics is the means for like our need to have an ideology, and then the ideology eventually takes over the ideal optimization of the governance system, and then we lose. Then it becomes an inhuman or a dehumanizing system. So obviously, I have a very optimistic and idealistic vision of governance and a very pessimistic perception of politics. But I wonder if that resonates with all of y'all.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, thanks, guys. I think that's right. Like, and absolutely, like I think a lot of the stuff that DAOs allow for humans to do in coordination is hopefully to, yeah, just kind of clear up a lot of the capture of politics of governance. I think is kind of what resonated with me there. Is that with your statement that politics can basically capture the governance
Yeah,
eventually.
can I just say one more quick thing about that? There's on the human element. It's we, I appreciate this sentiment that like you just got to jump in and start generating value, and that's really like something that we should all know. If it's your first day in DAOs or whatever, if that's like a little tidbit of wisdom that we might impart. But on the other hand, there's a real human element, and if you can find someone to work with one-on-one,
Yeah.
they're difficult to find. Like they're fucking busy and they don't want to talk to you because they don't know you. But if you can figure out some way of like, making a buddy or crafting a mentorship type relationship, and that requires humility. I mean, it requires maybe even a little bit of humiliation, right? Like you have to be courageous enough to understand what you don't know and really ask questions in a meaningful way that are not like you're going to wear your heart on your sleeve in this space. Like if you're in here trying to extract, everyone's going to see it right away. But if it's genuine and authentic and it puts the value of the community before your own self-interestedness, that will also be apparent. And just like quick shout out or quick props, I guess, to Earth to Travis, who's been serving as my mentor in a more diligent and like focused way for the last what feels like a few months. And to also, I mean, just to all of you up here right now, you've all served as mentors to me in various ways, various capacities at various times. And if it was really just so cut and dry, like come in and hang out for a little while and understand things and then get to work, I think there would probably be a different kind of community here.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. And I was thinking about a lot of parallel things yesterday about that's a really good one though. Find some one-on-ones in the DAO. And the reason, or like there's multiple reasons, but one is like the ability for a DAO to do anything is based on its ability to coordinate, and that ability to coordinate like an exponential, like if you can coordinate really well, then you're going to exponentially create more value. Basically, if you coordinate poorly, then you're going to create exponentially less value. And one thing that a DAO is really just a network of humans, and the strength of a DAO's ability to coordinate is basically, really like connected to the strength of the ties between each actor in the DAO. So each human, like the strength between each human, like a huge network of very weak ties between each people or each person, like that is less coordinated. But one where like there are many like very tight connections and very tight ties to each other, like you're going to coordinate way better at DAO. So I think that's a really great one to take from this. That's a really great advice for people joining DAOs is to find one-on-ones. Don't try to just be someone who is just just like a diffused part of the network. Try to like try to find something that doesn't scale. Try to find one-on-ones and real connections to like strengthen your own ties to the network.
And I think that also touches on Vin, like the importance of the IRL stuff and how much stronger these relationships get when we're together in the same place, but finding a way to replicate that in our daily work as we're all distributed is just it's been a lifesaver for me with JP, with Raid Guild, with TW, here at Dow House. Just like having that daily opportunity to just kind of digest what you've both experienced through that day. And some days we're really productive and we're figuring out the next steps and we're making progress. And some days we're just fucking blowing off steam and it's just like therapy. But it's so meaningful because that's the relationship stuff that's kind of missing in the asynchronous communication.
When you're improving the relationships between individuals, yeah, you improve the entire capability of the entire network at the same time, which is like magic.
We're, ta- we're talking about DAO hacks, but really they're community hacks, right? Um, and Travis, you mentioned like
Yeah, network.
how the if your actions seem to be community based, that they're gonna get a better reception from everyone else. I think that's really true. And also, I want to say, Travis, that like you're our mentor too. So a lot of time these
Yes.
relationships, you may start humble, but or you may be being humble, but they're two-way things. The values being like passed both ways. So I think the buddy systems are really good, and finding a one-on-one is great. Um, but to go back to like community hacks, I think there's a couple other things that are really important, and uh, one of them is ritual, and so things that are reoccurring that everyone can kind of get behind and feel like it's like a gravitational pull. It's a point and kind of pulls people back into this community vibe, and then recognition. Um, I think recognition is one of the most important things, and it's one of the It's one of the things to eat that's really easy to forget to do. Um, Whenever someone does anything in the community that is should be recognized like immediately, especially a new person coming in. If they do anything, I think like we could work on this too. It's like we need to just recognize those people and be like, yes, thank you. It's not what we wanted at all, but awesome, whatever it is. Just recognize that people they exist and they're taking time and they're doing something, um, not just lurking or whatever.
I mean, those are
Kind of.
those are people trying to reach out and create tighter connections in the network. And yeah, if they don't receive recognition, I mean, recognition is just validation that you're doing something right, and if you don't get that, then you'll probably just go somewhere else, and therefore community fail. That's a community fail, basically. If it was a person who really wanted to create value and they weren't recognized for whatever reason, then that community just lost potential value that could have been added. Um, yeah. Great
Yeah,
points.
it's interesting like that value statement because there's risks on both sides, right? Just like if you were making an investment, the community bringing on a new member or a new member attempting to become part of a community. Um, yeah, it's interesting because the a lot of times if you can break that first onboarding barrier, the value is like 10 times what you expect it to be. And so it's a really good investment to do up front, and making those small like lots of those small investments up front for the one person out of 10 that turns out to be a 10xer is gonna I don't like using that term but uh, just it's interesting how it can just like kind of explode in a good way.
What would you have liked to have known as a day one DAO contributor, Deacon?
um yeah, I mean the things that I've had to work on the most have been the community side of things. And so, and I guess so what that goes to is that, um, Well, so it's interesting. In Raid Guild, we kind of have the deep dive people and the wide people, like JP was saying. But both are really strong, and I guess I decided to take the kind of wide angle, where in the past maybe I had been more like a deep diver.
Mm-hmm.
They're both important, but for me, like getting better at the community side of things, and communication side of things, and writing and doing all these things, which meeting with people and talking with people, being on podcasts. None of those things were expected at all in my previous lives, but but it was also something right up front. I was like, these are things I want to work on, and even though I'm still fairly incoherent in my ramblings, I'm a lot better than I was a couple years ago. So, uh, no,
Definitely.
I'm getting better. I guess so. That thing is like be willing to wear multiple hats and embrace that in kind of personal development.
I think there's another thing there to extract on the, yeah, the deep, the deep dive and the wide. Um, I also have struggled with basically going back and forth between like deep dives into things and also just very wide contribution. And yeah, Felipe, you were talking about some things like that too. It is an interesting one. I wonder how we could help new DAO contributors navigate that in ways that they don't run into the same problem. I guess be careful, right? Just be aware of your. I think the time tracking, which would help you understand that you're kind of like too distributed. And everybody's different. Some people maybe are better at doing super wide things, and some people are just better at doing deep dives, and that totally is a thing. Um, but there is kind of like a little. It's kind of like going in and out of those two flows a lot.
Well,
Um, Tends to happen.
Yeah.
for sure.
I think I have. Sorry.
I just had a little anecdote to that. My background is in painting, and I also taught painting, like intro to 2D design and stuff like that in school. And the beginner mistake is to put everything on the canvas. Like you just want to have all your ideas go into one thing. But you have to learn how to say no. You have to learn how to say no to yourself, and to understand that when you restrain, the idea becomes more clear. And I think about that a lot as it translates to DAOs. Like, test everything, join all the discords, join all the conversations, cast your net wide and get a feel for lots of different communities, and then choose a few and deep dive into them and try to maximize the value that you can give to a few of them at first. You don't have to do everything all at once.
Yeah, I
Oh,
like that.
and then lastly, I would say look for the synergies. There's like a lot of overlaps. There's a lot of common problems. At least
What are
that's
the
been
odds
my
that
technique.
What are the odds that two painting teachers ended up in the same community in Web3? Holy shit! So
Well,
I
from
feel
like
I feel
design.
there's two
Go ahead,
metaphors
Felipe.
here that come from the painting world as well. Um, so basically, the binarity between wide and deep uh, is necessary for language, but in an actual action sense, and doesn't necessarily exist all the time. What I try to get people to reflect on, and I try to reflect on for people who I am working with, especially if they're under my guidance, is what do they seem to do when they think they're doing nothing? What is the value that they add even at rest because of who they are? So as a painter or an artist of any kind, there's going to be two things that you're doing kind of uh, by accident, but very intently, or subconsciously, but with deep intent. It's like sort of coming straight from the self with capital S. And one of them, it will be the type of subject or realm of the human experience that captures you and that feeds you to act, right? So what pushes you towards action without you having to um, really want to act? Because in my case, for example, it's in a weird, ridiculous way, it's an injustice in general, right? And coordination stupidity. So like when I watch a movie about any revolution, be it a shitty action movie, about a fictional, like Hunger Games, like I cry, right? If I watch the Che Guevara story, the two-part one, which is a beautiful movie and everybody should watch, and I cry my balls out. When Silvio Rodriguez comes on, I'm done. Like the music, the song "Fusil contra Fusil." So that's one thing. So what's the thing that's unavoidably a source of psychic energy for you? You need to keep acting until you find what that is. And the second thing is what I call in the painting, I always called it calligraphy. It's the way your body, your mind, your hand, in the case of painting, moves naturally. There is a component, there's a muscular component, like a psychophysical component to your way of acting. A lot of people thinking that the process of becoming a painter or an artist or any applied like sculpture or whatever has to do with mastering and controlling that calligraphy, and that's a notion that I've strongly thought against while teaching. You have your only role is to discover that. So once you find your calligraphy as a process of the archaeology of the child that has been civilized, and then match that to what gives you psychic energy, and then you use discipline to make that encounter a discernible, clear, sensible ethic, there is no way people will stop you from being some form of successful. That's the only mission. Okay, that was a, okay.
Christina, what's giving you energy?
Yeah. I rambled that. Okay. No,
that was
no
beautiful. I loved it. No, I wanted to just say that you guys are all facilitating all these things that you're talking about, and it's just deep gratitude for this community, and the leadership here. I know you guys lead not by commanding, and you lead by exemplifying all these things, and it's not just coming from like loving this experience, but also experiencing something very different. I'm not going to name names. But I was in another DAO. Oh, well, I'm still technically a member of it, but there was a community call where they were asking for suggestions. So I thought I had a really great suggestion. And I was DM'd, told that no, we're not even going to talk about that. We're doing it very different. So you guys are so completely different than that. I mean, I get very basic questions answered and encouraged to try new things. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's the wrong kind of no, that kind of top-down no, the tyrannical no.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
The community killer straight up.
Those are the toxic kind of people in a community that need to be thrown off the boat. But Christina, thank you for hopping on, and a bit of recognition here. The stuff you're doing is awesome, and the content you create and stuff. Like I love reading your things because I don't know, it just like gets me somewhere sometimes. It's hard to explain, but it feels like you get it, so it makes
Keep
me feel
sharing.
good.
Yeah.
Oh, I like the emotional deacon. That should come out more. Also,
I don't know why
plus
I feel like
thousands,
I've gotten
Christina
really
being a
kind of
badass.
emotional in this whole one, about boring how to hack community things.
Yes, I'm throwing shit at the wall here. And you also have the most gorgeous hair in Web3 too, so be happy with that.
Dang, that's quite a compliment.
To me?
There's some
Nah, man, I'm going ball sensitive these days.
John
John,
Slade.
what's up, man?
Hey, appreciate the invite, guys. Well, quick question for you. Earlier, you were talking about a new member joining a DAO and kind of balancing following the existing process or kind of creating your own process or offering suggestions for a new process. I appreciate that, but also thinking about the value of a existing process too, because joining any new organization, it's helpful to have something at least to refer to before you can start making suggestions. So in the process of spinning up a DAO for my university community and working on building that existing process or getting started with that existing process, hoping for some tips and tricks.
Yeah, there's definitely, totally, really good point. For sure, you have to have, people need a reference to coordinate, like what is going on, what can we do, all that stuff needs to be there, and it's true. And I totally didn't mean like to really like, you shouldn't come into a community with that particularly in mind to just change things and purpose just to do it. But if it's actually but like you said, being cognizant of where the community is and what they're doing and their processes, and if you change things too radically, then obviously that's going to take a wild amount of effort from everybody to change all the processes. So there is a coordination cost to radical change as well. So that is a really good consideration.
It goes into the bit we were talking about with documentation. The because there isn't necessarily this top-down, DMs telling you to not do something. A lot of it relies on the culture and the documentation. So you have, the things like your charter and mission and manifesto, whatever you want to call it. Though your documentation, your handbook, all those things become things that are leaned on very heavily by current members and new members. Because like you said, process is super important. And so your process doesn't need to be changed. Sometimes things are working and it goes, but if it needs to fit with the culture, right? So if sometimes processes just don't feel like they fit, and then that's when they really should be changed a lot.
And I mean, a good one to start with is like how to join. Like, what are the steps that are necessary to become a part of this community?
Yeah, lowering the barrier.
That's also one of the hardest things, but like Raid
valuable.
Guild has a really good handbook and documentation, but still you look at other people, other DAOs, mission statements, manifestos, handbooks. I think those are where those processes really come in to play.
Which is that one you said had a good one? I didn't hear the name.
Raid Guild.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
I'll drop a link for you.
And John, too, another suggestion is just like thinking about the minimum actions you want want members to take in the organization will help you to kind of figure out what the documentation needs to be to help facilitate that or help to hold hands with those members.
Yeah, we had joked around about some metric early days, like when you're doing app design, it's kind of called like time to joy or whatever, like different things to like kind of cut the time it takes for a human to get from the beginning to like their first reward, basically. And in a DAO, that would be like lowering, like in the process and documentation handbook, like the main thing there is just kind of trying to lower the barrier for people to create their first contribution that does two things. Adds value to the community, therefore it's like a thing that can be accepted by the community, like in a format or whatever they're doing, letting them know what outputs are acceptable and helpful, and then lowering the barrier to get those things done. The quicker someone enters a community and can add value to the community and get rewarded for it, that is basically what to optimize for, I think, in my opinion. But it does take a little time to get that first, you have to figure out what your process is and what you even want to do first. So it does have to get that up and running, and it's super malleable early days. But yeah, I like that as a goal for like handbooks.
That's super fascinating. Then I think your designer insight is always so great. I also want to play devil's advocate, and I know that we're at the end of the show, so there's no time, but I hope we can do a future episode on best practices in Web 2 as they compare to maybe adapting them for Web 3. and how that applies specifically to the DAO space. Like my immediate, not to question or to like negate what you just said, but it makes me wonder if getting someone to gratification as soon as possible is the like still the most important to emphasize red route for a user coming into the DAO space, or as we talk about in Raid Guild, whether a slower and more comprehensive onboarding process serves in itself as a vetting mechanism, and if that could be designed more intentionally, deliberately, which is to say slowly and subtly.
No, this could be a whole episode, because I have strong that too. Like, I don't think that I've been having experiences in DAOs now where it's becoming more famous, and people show up as like professional Disney. And they're like, "Oh, I looked at your Discord for half a day. Give me money." And I don't know how that's going to work. But here is your professional house part fairy, and I'm here to tell you that the time is up. The new format might need a little bit of a jarring stop because we just get the ball rolling, right? But this was fucking great. Thank you, everybody. I still want to encourage in next episodes, everybody who's on the audience to kind of jump on stage. Of course, it helps if you think through your contribution and do it from a place of generosity and looking for collective victories and stuff like that. But I think it's time to wind down our little house party of today. And I want to know if you guys have any final thoughts.
Just grateful for everybody working on these enormous problems together. Thank you.
Yeah, the last hack I would say is small teams are better at getting things done than giant teams. But thanks, Felipe.
What did I do?
You hosted, and you're awesome. You're awesome.
A big flying hug to all of you, and thank you for being here with us tonight. Ciao.
See you all. Party on.
Bye.